Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, Play by Play proudly brings to you the best daily wrestling podcast in the world. Welcome everyone to episode 20 of Play by Play. You can hear that this is not Atif Nawaz, who's usually in. Today I thought I'd do a solo one as I'm away in Eastern Europe. I'm in Slovenia, Ljubljana. I'm working on a film project, which is why I couldn't be with you for the last couple of days. But the show must go on, and it has been going on. Arthur's been doing a really good job, and my thanks to him for holding up his end while I've been away, trying to play the rock. No, just thought I'd sort of slip that in there, as Arthur keeps making reference to the fact that I've sort of left him in the lurch and left him by himself. But he's been doing a great job. Thanks also to Rich Latta, Dangerous Rich 32 on Twitter. For filling in yesterday with a really good episode on who should be on the Hall of Fame. And as always, mentions to our sponsors, eWrestling News, which is a great website where you can catch, it's an aggregator of news, so you can actually get there and find out what's happening on all the other sort of news sites and what the latest information behind the scenes is on all wrestling promotions. And also to Top Rope Press, who have kindly put our banner up. So go there, click on all the lovely links, listen to our podcast, share it with all your friends. It's definitely the best podcast in the world when it comes to wrestling. And I think one of the best daily wrestling podcasts. We do have the slammer, we do go on day by day, and I'm really looking forward to sort of what the future is going to bring for us with all these lovely new partnerships. Now, coming to today's show, I think there are a few things that I wanted to address that were discussed, and those of you that regularly listen, would have noticed a pattern that I never seem to have the opinion that Atif has. Maybe I'm not the usual internet smart fan, maybe I'm not your typical WWE fan, but I am a fan. As people on eWrestling News often say, I've only started watching the product 6 months ago, which is clearly and evidently true by the comments that I make. But you know what? That's my opinion, and I'm going to stick to it. And just for the record, no, I've been watching since 1991. So you can see my level of insight as you wish to. But that's my opinion, and I'm going to stick to it. And I respect all of your opinions. I love it when you take issue with what I have to say. I love taking issue with what Arthur has to say, because sometimes I simply don't agree with it. And this is something I want to talk about, something that I genuinely don't agree with. I know Roman Reigns has been getting a lot of stick for winning the Rumble. And yes, I agree that Daniel Bryan shouldn't have been eliminated in the way that he has. And I think Daniel Bryan is one of the best technical wrestlers the WWE has ever seen. And he's definitely one of the most over wrestlers with the WWE crowd, which is fantastic. But that does not mean he has a rite of passage just because he's got a good gimmick. Because of social psychology, the crowd dynamics work in a way that his gimmick has gone over in a way that probably no other gimmick has gone over. That does not mean that he has a right to be in the main event every single year. Now, I think that that's me being a little bit unfair, because I don't think that's what Daniel Bryan's supporters necessarily want. But there are a few things that have been discussed on this podcast, and let me take them one by one. So, firstly, we referred to Wade Keller's remarks saying that, look, Daniel Bryan might not be the best choice for the next long term, 5 years, 10 years, 3 years even. But, he's hot right now, so why doesn't the WWE cash in? And I know Arthur thinks that that's an absolutely fantastic way of going about doing things and cashing in on the popularity. Well, I agree with you. I think the WWE could do that. And I think to an extent they did do that last year, the WrestleMania 30 program. But on the one hand, so many fans, and me included, complain that why are the WWE not planning long term? Why is it that we have short-term booking? Why do we have stop-change booking? Why do we have stop-start booking? Right? So the point is, now you've got a situation where the WWE have found their guy, or where it looks like they found a guy that they think could be. Let me stress could, because there's no guarantees ever in the WWE, right? But they think that Reigns could be the new face of the WWE. He could be the new face wrestler, maybe alongside Cena, if not replacing him. Now, they've stuck with the plan. They've chosen a man, and yes, it hasn't been very well disguised, so a lot of people have seen it coming, but yet they've stuck to it. And me, for one, I don't understand who would have been clearly the much better choice for the Rumble. Now, you could have given it to Daniel Bryan, yes, and he could have been a choice, but it wouldn't have been clearly a much better choice. He's just come back from a 9-month injury. We don't know how long he's going to even last in the ring, and clearly he's not the traditional look in terms of size and feel that the main WWE icon has had for many, many generations. So, he he might, it might be that he would have been a good choice, but he may not necessarily, he's not hands down the best choice because of all these factors that we take into account. If you look at some of the other contenders, Bray Wyatt, well, he wasn't really given much of a chance going into it. He had a good show at the Rumble. I think despite not winning it, he's retained some credibility. And I'll talk about him a little bit more later on. Dean Ambrose, now he had a choice, but the way he's been booked, and he even jobbed to wrestlers like Bray Wyatt in ambulance matches leading up to the Rumble, it really wasn't going to work with him winning and give the Rumble sort of credibility. Ziggler, again, he would have been a popular choice, but at the end of the day, again, he sells a hell of a lot. He's taken a lot of beatings. He was fired leading up to the Rumble, so he would have been okay, but he, clearly, he wouldn't have been the strongest contender to win the Rumble. So I guess my point is, Reigns was as good as anybody to be a choice. Now, coming to the sort of, the criticisms that Reigns gets, that he's been pushed too early. Well, firstly, that's not his fault, so I can't really hold that against him. Secondly, Reigns isn't a good worker. Well, as I've mentioned before, I don't remember a lot of people complaining about his lack of abilities and in-ring work when he was a member of the Shield. Yes, they were part of a trio, and yes, some of his weaknesses weren't highlighted as much as they are now as a single superstar. But the fact of the matter is, he was given a character. He played it well. It can't be his fault that he was in a trio or three-way tag team. Often they did fight as tag teams as well in certain matches. And he did his job. And so that demonstrates to me that this guy was given an opportunity and he excelled in it. Now, I can't complain that he didn't excel in a position that he wasn't given at that time. But maybe that time is now. So, we know that, over the course of 2014, he was given a push and then he got injured, which sort of stopped his push, which gave an opportunity for people like Rollins. And I remember a lot of the internet wrestling community saying that Rollins was going to be the weakest link of the Shield when the Shield were a trio and they were doing really well. But now, especially post-Rumble, wow, what a 5-star match that triple threat was. Rollins is probably the true winner of the Royal Rumble, and I think has come out and demonstrated what Shawn Michaels demonstrated back in the day in matches that he wasn't winning, with the fact that he was stealing the show. So I've got a lot of time for Rollins, and he might not even have been given that opportunity had it not been for Roman Reigns' injury at the time. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that it takes time for people to go over, and I think people need to give them a chance. The problem at the moment is that the fans clearly have taken a very strong liking, and are backing Daniel Bryan. And for one reason or the other, he's not seen as the face or the choice from the hierarchy in the WWE. Now, whether that's just or that's unjust, that's not really the point that we need to focus on, which I think is where we're all going wrong. I think too many people are sitting there trying to fight for the right to book their perfect match. Well, it never really works like that, especially for wrestlers of Daniel Bryan's size and physique. If you look at the good workers in the past, whether it's Shawn Michaels, whether it was Bret Hart, these guys all had to pay their dues. And, Michaels had to win 2 Rumbles before he was actually considered to be the main face of the WWE in WrestleMania 12, I believe, where he had the Iron Man match with Bret, and he had his boyhood dream coming true storyline. Now, he'd won the Rumble already in '95, right? He'd already main evented against Diesel at WrestleMania 11, but yet he still wasn't considered to be the face of the WWE. So the way the marketing at the WWE works and the way the planning works is with smaller guys, usually they're given a lot of adversity in the years building up to them becoming the face of the organization. And I think that's exactly the same. A lot of people keep telling me, oh, you know what, Daniel Bryan, he's given an unfair deal, it's unjust. What I think a lot of you guys don't understand is that the WWE are actually working the crowd. They're working the audience, because the adversity at the moment in his way are the authority and also the supposedly behind the scenes management. Now, that makes for good TV, because you guys, and me included, we tune in every day. And I'm a Daniel Bryan fan. We tune in every week to see what's going to happen with Bryan. Is he going to be dealt with justly or unjustly? Now, he's already had a great moment at WrestleMania 30. That's not to say he won't have more WrestleManias, but it's not to say that he needs to have another one straight away. In fact, as I already said previously, I see no reason why, if he's such a big draw, that you actually need to put him in the title picture in the first place. I think, we can still have a really good WrestleMania card. We can still get a new guy over, potentially, in Roman Reigns, if he's given the opportunity, without necessarily demanding as fans that Daniel Bryan has to be in every single main event. But I guess the frustrations, and to an extent, I have to address the fact that I'm not suggesting that Daniel Bryan has been booked fairly, because I'm not, because I think that, he does deserve a better gimmick. I mean that a gimmick. I mean, a lot of people, I know he's over with his current gimmick with his guest chants and stuff, but I really feel to be the face of the WWE, he can, come out and do justice to his own talents by having a more, a gimmick that's gonna stretch, evolve and actually bring out the true Daniel Bryan, and not this guy who doesn't look so visually appealing, although he does look interesting. And I think that he could really do with a new storyline as well, that doesn't just revolve around the Authority sort of damaging his sort of credibility and path. So, I don't think that the way that he was booked at the Rumble was good, but I can see why it happened. They just wanted to get him out the way before Reigns was to win, because can you imagine what would have happened if the final two, the final three, and the final four were Reigns and Bryan? Can you imagine the boos that you would have heard? I mean, you thought Royal Rumble was bad this year. It would have been yet worse, believe me, if Bryan was eliminated by Reigns in the final two or the final three. Although a lot of people suggest that it wouldn't have, and that's what they wanted. Well, I think that's petty. So just because you guys didn't get a good spot for Daniel Bryan, you've decided to hijack one of the most important Rumbles, one of the most important events in the Royal Rumble that the WWE holds every year, and frankly ruined it for some of those fans that aren't necessarily thinking that Bryan is the only choice, and I'm certainly one of them. Again, I'd like to reiterate, I'm not against Daniel Bryan, not at all. I think he's one of the most talented and possibly has the potential to become the best technical wrestler in the years ahead, but I don't need to see him force-fed down my throat at the same time as well. And I quite like the way that he's being held back, and I hope and anticipate that he's going to have yet further moments and going to have better years ahead of him. Just like a lot of wrestlers of his sort of stature, physique, and size have done in the past. So those are some of my thoughts. You may agree. And just to answer Arthur's point from yesterday's podcast, and he mentioned a good point. So when Wade Keller said, why not, cash in for the sort of the 6 months or whatever, and go with the storyline while he's hot right now. Well, I think the problem with that is that you've built up other wrestlers in that period, such as Rollins, such as Reigns, now you're giving him a push, such as Rusev, and all of these guys potentially might not have the same sense of popularity in their storyline 6 to 12 months, and yet if you push them now, they could end up having 3 to 5 year programs. And if you don't believe me, I mean, the way I'm looking at it, for Reigns, he can have his feud with Lesnar right now. Reigns versus Cena can work. Reigns versus Rollins can work. Reigns versus Bryan can work. Reigns versus Ambrose can work. Reigns versus Rusev can work. And, with all of these potential matchups, if you do back Roman Reigns, whether it's as a face or with a heel turn down the line, when you bring in Paul Heyman to side, especially if Brock decides to leave, you could turn him into a legitimate main event contender over the next 3 to 5 years, a bit like they did with the Legacy Stars, or the Evolution Stars, I beg your pardon, when they had Batista and Orton as part of the Evolution group. And Orton and Batista weren't over necessarily to the extent that they obviously became, but the fact that they were given those pushes at the time helped them cement their status as main event contenders. And I remember Batista eliminating John Cena and winning the Rumble one year, especially with the botch ending and with sort of Vince coming in and ripping his quads and whatnot. In fact, I remember Batista trying to have that again with Batista last year, and we also sort of how that ended. So look, it's not doom and gloom. I actually am a lot more positive about the status in WWE at the moment. I think there's a really good roster in terms of talent. I know there isn't a lot of depth, but some of the people at the top are really good. We've got Rollins. Rusev is looking strong at the moment. Ziggler is a tremendous worker. Brock Lesnar is still there. Hopefully he'll stay beyond sort of Mania. Of course, Daniel Bryan is there. And, I think Roman Reigns has potential. And if we look at SmackDown this week and Raw since the Rumble, now I agree, Reigns is probably the least developed in-ring worker when it comes to all 3 Shield members. But at the same time, he's probably got the strongest look from the 3 members. Now, as WWE, they've got to think about not just in-ring talent. And, we've got lots of precedents in the past, even currently, of people that sell out arenas without necessarily being the best workers. Hogan wasn't the amazing in-ring worker. He was a good storyteller. John Cena clearly has had so much negativity around his in-ring potential, even though I think he's delivered some really, really good 4.5-star to 5-star matches over the last few years and put over lots and lots of stars that have gone on to do really good things. So, but I think admittedly he doesn't have the most complex moveset, and he clearly could be better in the ring. But the fact is, he's still worth a hell of a lot of money through merchandise, through press, through commitments, but also through his in-ring adversity that his character brings and polarizes opinion. And that's exactly what I think will be good for Reigns. The fact that he's having an opinion towards him right now is the best thing for both himself and for the WWE. The worst thing would have been if nobody cared. But the fact that people are booing him, that is a lot of interest in him. Now, that presents him with an opportunity to go out there, prove the doubters wrong, have a really good in-ring season almost, or have a series of matches leading up to Mania, even at Mania, and take that opportunity. Now, that opportunity may not come again if he doesn't deliver, but the fact that he's got the opportunity is down to hard work and down to him being maybe the right person at the right time, because there are a lot of sacrifices that a lot of wrestlers make to be in that position, and some get there and some don't. And the reality of it is that Roman Reigns has been given an opportunity, and there's no two ways about it. But whether or not he takes that opportunity, and if he doesn't take it, that would be a fair way to judge the situation. But at the moment, I think it's far too early. But there's lots of people that weren't great workers. Ultimate Warrior was over and sold out arenas for years, but he wasn't necessarily the best in-ring worker. And the best in-ring workers, again, if we look at Michaels, if we look at Brett, who probably the two best workers that I've seen in my lifetime, even Chris Benoit, who's a really good worker, they weren't necessarily the people that were selling out arenas. In fact, I seem to remember Brett and Shawn's years at the top and the faces of WWE was some of the worst in terms of ratings. And that's not just a reflection of them. There was a lot of other things and factors in play at the time. But the fact of the matter is that the WWE have definitely made more money on stronger looks and characters and stories than they did with necessarily the best workers. So I guess that's a point that's obvious, but it's not stated enough in this example with Roman Reigns. And I think it is important for people to remember. And in fact, The Rock, even fantastic worker, probably better than a lot of people that I mentioned as the top tier, but it wasn't. His cousin Roman Reigns, of course, wasn't necessarily the best in-ring worker, but his promo and his storyline and his storytelling was really valuable. But that is something that Reigns needs to work on, and I think we've started to see signs on Raw with his face-to-face with Lesnar that he really had improved. Now his match with the Big Show was a tough spot in my opinion. I can see why they kind of gave him the Big Show, because it gave him an opportunity to have a slightly longer match. Maybe be the smaller man in a scenario where he can get some sympathy, maybe sell a little bit more of his injuries that he's getting as throughout the match, which he did. There were a few botches. I don't think it was the cleanest match, but in general, I don't think it was a terrible match, especially for SmackDown. I think he did a decent job, probably starting to develop his in-ring work and personality a bit more. But yes, I don't think he is the finished article. But I think the key thing for him is not only his in-ring work style, which definitely needs to improve, but I think his promos need to cross over to the audience and be a lot more relatable. I'm glad they're not doing the sort of Looney Tunes and all that kind of stuff which they were doing previously. I think they're moving away from that, and I think he needs a little bit more freedom on the mic to bring out his real personality, which I think will do him a lot of favors, and I think will help get him over, or if they don't get him over, will at least help him when he turns into a heel. So those are my thoughts on Reigns. I know I've spent quite a lot of time talking about him, but I think that's the key thing that is on everybody's sort of mind at the moment, and I just want to give the guy a fair chance. I wasn't necessarily his biggest fan. I'm still not, and actually, the kind of fan I am, and this is probably very personal to me, I wasn't a big John Cena fan, but the one night that John Cena really impressed me as a fan, and I wanted to back this guy, was ECW One Night Stand, which is the night that he got probably the hardest night of his life, one of the best pay-per-views in that sort of era for me, and a tremendous crowd. And I've got no problem with the crowd, because they didn't like his style, they didn't like his character, they didn't like him being forced down. But that's where he was given the opportunity, and I think he really made himself into a main event secure guy. He dropped the title that night, and he did it in really well. He did it with a lot of dignity, is what I'm trying to say, and that's really where I think I became a fan of his work, despite the adversity and the conditions he was sort of put under that evening. So, you know, I can only think that it would be a dream for Roman Reigns to get that kind of a reaction at this stage of his career, because it would teach him a hell of a lot. It would put him in the deep end, as he mentions his promo on Raw. And I think that that would be something that he can really potentially benefit from. Now, not everybody is a John Cena, and not everybody will necessarily rise to the challenge. But I'm looking forward to it, and it makes for good TV, and that is possibly the most important thing here. In my point of view, the backstage stuff, the internet community, the forums, all of this are an integral part of the show. So the WWE, in my opinion, are playing all of us by including us in the storyline, because that's what's keeping us engaged. And until people stop subscribing to the network, until people stop turning off. And by the way, Raw had a really good rating this week. SmackDown had a really good rating this week. Both were up from the previous weeks, and both were up from the previous shows the year before. So the truth is that they are doing really well, and you know, they're not suffering. And a lot of people who are unhappy with the product are actually justified, because that's part of the storyline at the moment, and that's my opinion. The fact is that, you know, viewers never get exactly what they want, and that's what makes for good TV. Sometimes when you're given a product that you're not engaging with in terms of the outcome straight away, but maybe there is a long-term hope, and that hope is definitely there with Brian, is definitely there with a lot of previous stars and a lot of storylines. And I think that's exactly what WWE need to do. They need to keep you hooked by having storylines that aren't sort of playing exactly how the audience want on a week-by-week or a month-by-month basis. Just moving on, I mean, I just want to talk about this casket match that happened, and ironically, it features Daniel Bryan and Kane. But I've got a point to make. I was watching it, and I didn't think it was a fantastic match. I know that Arthur said yesterday on the show that he thought it was a great match. I actually thought it was quite flat. I think that they didn't enjoy working with the casket. I think the dynamics are a bit strange in a post-kayfabe era. Unless you're writing a wrestler off of TV or off of the show, like they've done in the past with The Undertaker and stuff, putting somebody in the casket really doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, because that's when you're meant to be dead, right? So it only really worked for people who were dying, character-wise, or going to come back from the dead. Undertaker, probably the only person. And I know they've done it in the past, but I don't really want to see Kane on Raw after he's been put into a casket, because that makes a whole joke out of the situation. And I know that, you know, it's not real, but at the end of the day, the best TV is always when you're blurring. And, you know, just even if they're targeting the sort of PG audience. I mean, I remember when I was at the PG audience, I remember the '94 Rumble where Undertaker lost the casket match through outside interference. In fact, the whole heel roster from the WWE at the time helped Yokozuna bury him. And that was some of the most intriguing TV that I'd seen. He was written off for ages until the Undertaker versus Undertaker famous feud that happened at SummerSlam that year. Now, it wasn't necessarily the greatest match, but it was definitely one of the most intriguing things that I watched as a child. I'm not really sure what the casket match of 2015 now represents. Does that mean Kane is going to have some time off? I certainly hope so. Or does that mean that he's going to be back on Raw the next week and that was just the end of their feud, which is what the commentators made reference to. Bringing me on to the commentators really quickly, I'm starting to think that Brian Saxton's actually doing a really good job. I'm starting to feel that it's not working with Jerry Lawler. He almost seemed ignored for much of SmackDown. I don't know if that was down to some editing or whether that was down to the dynamics. But I'm starting to feel that either he's not really a welcome addition to the SmackDown team, which is a shame, because I think he does have potential, although some of his recent work necessarily isn't his best. So I'm starting to fear that he's coming towards the end of his career, which I think is fairly obvious. But I would like him to go out with a bang, because some of my best Raw moments or WWE moments have been with Jerry Lawler commentating, and often as a heel. And I'm not so happy with him being a really nice guy at the moment. And I think that the WWE have missed out on him being a heel. And he's way better than JBL, in my opinion, as a heel commentator. So those are my thoughts on the SmackDown new announcing team that's been introduced in 2015. Quickly touching on some of the other things that are going on. I'm slightly concerned about Bray Wyatt. He seems to be cutting promos in thin air at the moment. And they're not the most exciting, and they're clearly difficult to follow. And I know that's part of his character. But I really feel what he needs is a proper feud with somebody, and he needs his promos to be directed that and for them to make sense in relation to a feud rather than him just trying to establish his character, because that is something we've all accepted now. He's been there for the best part of 2 years, and he is over, and he is a really good worker. And there are talks of him maybe having that fight with Undertaker at WrestleMania 31, although I'm really not sure what purpose that serves for Taker. But that is a match I think I would like to see, just because of the storyline and the supernatural sort of characteristics that both wrestlers have in their gimmicks. But I'm really unsure at the moment if that is the way they're going to go, because by all accounts, I'm not really sure if Taker will be wrestling this year, if at all. And even if he does, I'm not sure what purpose it serves to come back after 21-1 to put over another wrestler, albeit in another Taker victory, perhaps. Wrestlers who fight Taker don't need to beat Taker to go over. And I think that's something that Bray Wyatt could benefit from, but I'm not really sure what that means for The Undertaker, especially as he's sort of ending or nearing the end of his career at the moment. I was quite happy with the John Cena promo against Rusev on SmackDown. I think he's showing passion. I think he's showing aggression, and he's really got into the feud straight after being in the main event, which is something that I think deserves credibility and admirability. Because John Cena is a very good performer, and he is a main eventer, and he will, do good for Rusev in their feud. Whether or not he goes over, I think is irrelevant. But the fact is, he's putting some passion into it, and that's something that maybe Reigns can even learn from, because that's possibly the one thing that's lacking a little bit. I think the other thing that didn't help was the promos on Raw when he made on SmackDown when he made his entrance. I think the mics went down for both Triple H and Reigns, and talk about really bad timing when he really does need the mic turned up. But I think John Cena and Rusev will have a good match at Fastlane, and I don't know if they'll go on to Mania, but I guess the audience and the WWE will decide going forward. And coming to the Hall of Fame, because I know I'm running out of time a little bit. We had some really good shouts yesterday from Rich Latta, from Artif, when they were discussing Muhammad Ali. I think would have been great, although I don't really see the WWE ever making a big deal out of him now. I'm not sure what the relationship has been since WrestleMania 1 between the two companies, but hey, never say never in the WWE. So Muhammad Ali would have been a really good shout. There was a guy that they didn't mention yesterday, and I remember him main eventing a Mania, Lawrence Taylor against Bam Bam Bigelow. I believe it was WrestleMania 11. He really was a big part of a Mania and would be good as part of the celebrity wing. They mentioned Pamela Anderson yesterday, Royal Rumble 95, going into WrestleMania 95. That was a really, really good addition to the storyline between Shawn Michaels and Diesel, and Chuck Norris, as mentioned yesterday. I think it's a bit too early for Floyd, because he's sort of been part of WWE storylines not too long ago. And I'm not sure he deserves his place, but yes, from a marketing point of view, I do agree. If he fights Pacquiao, I think the WWE would have missed a trick, to be very honest, and I think everyone would have benefited from that. So that is my a wrap, almost, as they would say, for episode 20, coming straight from a hotel room in Slovenia, in Ljubljana. I should be back next to my colleague Artif, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more disagreements. But yeah, I mean, the main thing is that you guys continue to engage with us, tell us your thoughts, and I think I'm really looking forward to Raw, which will be on Monday evening, and I think that's when this episode will be out. So let's give you a match of the day, as is our tradition, and I will give you a match from ECW One Night Stand, which was the match between Rob Van Dam and John Cena, where John Cena really gave in my opinion, one of his best performances as an on-screen character. So I think you should check it out. And I guess the question of the day for Monday from my side, with the Dean Douglas Award, and if Glenn Abbott is listening, he'll, I'm sure, want to participate as one of our most frequent winners of the award, as well as all of you. And let's see who can get the first sort of answer in here. So at ECW One Night Stand, the main event for the title was Rob Van Dam versus John Cena. But who left with the WWE title that night? So that's one for you guys to think about. I'm going to head off. I've got a good week of shooting and traveling coming up, and I will join my play-by-play podcast wrestling partner Arthur Noaz next week. Look forward to hearing all of your comments, answers. Tweet us, follow us at PlayByPlay123. Follow our sponsors, eWrestling News and Top Rope Press, and keep giving us lots of your love. Take care. Goodbye. See you soon.